Snow covered the streets of Amberville, where the Christmas lights shone like little whispers of hope on a freezing night. In Thomas's red brick house, a group of friends gathered around a candlelit table. The scent of fresh pine mingled with the sweet perfume of hot chocolate, served in ceramic mugs. Before continuing, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thomas, a man with a calm voice and a firm presence, stood up. He had called his friends together for a special talk. Everyone there had faced internal battles that year. Losses, doubts, abrupt changes. But Thomas believed that these difficulties were not in vain. He wanted to share something profound he had learned. The signs the universe gives us when we are growing up, ready for something bigger. This year, he began, hasn't been easy for any of us. But there is something in common in our stories, a pattern that repeats itself. Call them tests, challenges, or even gifts in disguise. These moments have shaped us. Today, I want to share 8 signs that show you have passed the test of the universe. Thomas looked at David, his longtime friend, a reserved man who had been through a recent breakup and was trying to rebuild his life. "David," said Thomas, "you told me how in the midst of the confusion and pain, something changed inside you. Despite everything falling apart around you, you found a peace you'd never felt before. That's the first sign." David bowed his head in agreement and began to speak. "It was strange. I lost almost everything. My marriage, my home, even my confidence. But in the midst of the chaos, I stopped fighting what I couldn't control. Instead, I accepted it. It was as if I had dived into a turbulent lake and suddenly realized that I could float. I began to feel peace, even if I didn't understand how." Thomas smiled. "That's what I call inner peace. When the universe tests us, it wants to see if we can connect with this inner strength, even when all seems lost. That's the first sign that we're ready for something bigger." He turned to the others and continued. "Peace in the midst of chaos is not the absence of problems. It's the ability to find balance, to understand that every storm comes with a lesson, and that's where we grow." Another friend, Michael, raised his hand. He was an entrepreneur who had faced bankruptcy that year. The glint in his eye showed that he had something important to say. "I lost my company, my dream for years," Michael began, his voice firm but full of emotion. "At first, all I felt was anger and despair. But little by little, I realized that I needed to let go of control, to accept the flow of life. That's when something incredible happened. I started sleeping better. Even without a clear plan for the future, I felt an inexplicable peace." "That's exactly what I mean," replied Thomas. "When we trust the process and stop fighting the current, we find something precious, the ability to navigate the waves without drowning." The men around the table began to share their own experiences. Richard, the oldest of the group, recalled a phrase he had always carried with him. "In the midst of confusion, God whispers." "That peace is like a whisper," he said. "A reminder that no matter how dark the tunnel, there is always light at the end." As the conversation flowed, the friends realized that each had experienced the first sign differently. The peace they found in the midst of chaos didn't come from outside, but from within. It was as if the universe had given them an invisible compass, guiding them through the storm. After a brief silence, Thomas continued. He knew that the next point was crucial to understanding how the universe shapes the chosen ones. "Now, I want to talk about the second sign. It's something we all seek, but few actually find: alignment with our authentic self." He turned to Liam, a teacher who had recently left his career to follow a long-held dream of becoming an artist. Liam was sitting in the corner of the room, his hands intertwined, listening intently. Liam, you've shown us what it means to live authentically. Can you share what that journey was like? Liam took a deep breath before answering. For many years, I lived the life I thought I should live. Teaching was something I enjoyed, but it wasn't my real passion. I always dreamed of painting, but I was afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of disappointing my family. Afraid of not being enough. This year, after losing my mother, I realized that I could no longer live in fear. It was painful, but I finally started to be honest with myself. Was it easy? Asked Thomas, encouraging him to continue. No, replied Liam with a wistful smile. In fact, it was the opposite. At first it felt like I was destroying everything I'd built. But then I realized that I wasn't losing. I was finding myself. The more I left behind other people's expectations, the more I felt that my life made sense. Now, when I'm painting, I feel as if time has stopped. It's where I'm myself, without masks. Thomas nodded. That's exactly it. Aligning yourself with who you really are takes courage. It's an act of faith. But when you find that alignment, everything starts to flow. You realize that true happiness lies not in pleasing others, but in living according to your truth. Richard, the oldest of the group, raised his hand. He had a deep voice and a way of speaking that captured everyone's attention. When I was young, he began, I was forced to take over the family business. It was never something I loved, but I felt it was my duty. I spent decades living a life that wasn't mine. When I turned 60, I finally had the courage to sell the company and start again. I started working in furniture restoration, something that had always brought me joy. It took a while, but today I know I'm living according to my purpose. The group listened in silence, absorbing every word. You're living proof that it's never too late to align with your authentic self, said Thomas. The universe tests us to make sure we're ready to let go of what no longer serves and embrace what really matters. At the end of the discussion, everyone agreed that living authentically was an ongoing journey. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but a series of daily choices. Whether you're 30, 40, or 60, said Thomas, the important thing is that it's never too late to be who you really are. When we are aligned with our essence, the universe conspires in our favor. It opens doors that seemed locked before. Thomas stood up again, holding a mug of hot chocolate in his hands. Now, on to the third sign. It's something that many fear, but which is essential for growth. Change. He looked at Jacob, a firefighter who had recently faced major changes in his life. Jacob had lost his home in a fire, and despite this, found the strength to continue helping others. Jacob, can you tell us how you learned to embrace change? Jay. Jacob leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the flame of a candle. It was hard, he admitted. When my house burned down, I felt like I'd lost everything. But then I realized that change is inevitable. You can either resist it or accept it. I chose to accept it. I managed to rebuild not only my house, but also my outlook. Today I see every change as an opportunity to start again. Thomas smiled. You're a perfect example of what it means to embrace change. It's not about ignoring pain or fear, but about using them as fuel for growth. When we open our hearts to the unknown, we discover strengths we didn't even know we had. He paused and looked at the others. The universe tests us with changes to remind us that we are constantly evolving. We're not the same people we were yesterday, and that's a beautiful thing. Thomas turned his attention to Daniel, a young writer who always seemed to be on the verge of anxiety. Daniel had spent years trying to publish his first novel, facing repeated rejections and questioning his worth as an author. "Daniel, can you talk about how you learned to trust the time of the universe?" asked Thomas with an encouraging smile. Daniel took a deep breath before beginning. "I used to think that my time was the only time that mattered. When I sent my book to publishers and heard dozens of no's, I was devastated. It was as if the universe was telling me I wasn't good enough. But then, during a spiritual retreat, I realized something important. The universe doesn't operate on my schedule. It has its own rhythm, and my only task is to keep working and trust the process." Daniel tells how this epiphany changed his approach. He stopped putting so much pressure on himself and started focusing on the joy of writing. "When I took the pressure off myself, the words started flowing again. And surprisingly, a few weeks later, I got a call from a publisher. Not only did they accept my book, but they said it was exactly the kind of story they were looking for." Thomas nodded. "That's it. Trusting in divine timing doesn't mean giving up. It means continuing to plant seeds, knowing that they will blossom when the time is right. The universe is always working for our good, even when we can't see it at the moment." Henry, a farmer who had been quiet until then, decided to share his experience. "My whole life has been based on trusting the weather," he began. "I plant seeds in early spring and wait patiently until fall to harvest. There's no point in forcing nature. It follows its own rhythm. And I think life is like that too. We need to plant with intention, but trust that the harvest will come at the right time." Henry's words resonated deeply with the group. Thomas seized the moment to reinforce the lesson. Divine timing is a reminder that there is a bigger plan at work. Our task is to trust, even when it seems like nothing is happening. Everything is lining up behind the scenes. Thomas moved towards the window, where the Christmas lights were twinkling outside. "The next sign is something that many of us have experienced, but sometimes ignore. Synchronicities." He turned to Noah, a musician who always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. "Noah, have you ever wondered why coincidences happen so often in your life?" Noah laughed. "I always wonder that. It feels like the universe is sending me messages. Once, I was thinking about giving up music when I saw a poster about an audition in a cafe I never went to. I decided to give it a go, and it led to a contract that changed my life." Thomas explained that synchronicities are more than coincidences. They are the universe's way of guiding us. When we pay attention, we start to notice patterns, repeating numbers, unexpected encounters, opportunities that seem to come out of nowhere. All of this is the universe telling us that we're on the right track. He encouraged the group to share their own experiences with synchronicities. Each story seemed more magical than the last, from finding books that answered specific questions to meeting people who changed their lives. "These moments are not by chance," said Thomas. "They are like whispers from the divine, reminding us that we are never alone, and that there is a greater purpose in everything we do." The mood in the room became more introspective when Thomas announced the next signal. "Now let's talk about something that is a real challenge for many: mastering our emotions." He looked at Marcus, a military veteran who had spent years dealing with post-traumatic stress. "Marcus, you are the embodiment of someone who has learned to deal with his emotions in a healthy way. Can you share how you achieved this?" Marcus began to speak in a firm but emotional voice. "In the beginning, my emotions controlled me. Anger, fear, guilt. They all seemed to be in charge. But with therapy and practice, I learned that emotions are not enemies. They are messengers. Instead of fighting them, I started listening to them. And when I did, I realized that I could let them come and go without consuming myself. Thomas praised Marcus for his vulnerability. That's exactly it. When we learn to observe our emotions without judgment, they lose their power to dominate us. This emotional mastery is one of the clearest signs that we have passed the tests of the universe. It prepares us to face anything with grace and poise. Thomas paused for the group to absorb everything that had been discussed so far. Each of these signs is a step on the journey of self-discovery and growth. It's not about perfection, but about progress. When we recognize these signs in our lives, we know we're on the right track. He looked at his watch and smiled. Let's take a break before continuing with the last two signs. Take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed so far, and think about how these signs have manifested themselves in your lives. Lucas nodded and began to speak with humility. After years of working in renowned hospitals, I realized that something was missing. I had everything I thought I wanted, a good salary, recognition, but I felt empty. So I decided to listen to my heart and move to a small town where I could really make a difference. He smiled. It was difficult at first. Fewer resources, more challenges. But every time I helped a child recover or comforted a family, I felt I was exactly where I needed to be. Thomas took the opportunity to emphasize that serving doesn't have to be something grandiose. Serving is finding ways to contribute, whether it's a small gesture or a big sacrifice. It's sharing what we have, our time, our talents, our love, to make the world a better place. The group discussed ways of serving in their own lives, from everyday acts of kindness, such as holding the door for someone, to larger community projects. Thomas concluded, "When we serve, we connect with something bigger than ourselves. We become part of a collective purpose, and that is deeply rewarding. And so we conclude our journey of reflection. I want you, who have followed us this far, to know that you are not alone. Every challenge we face, every lesson learned, and every sign recognized is proof of how much we are shaped for something greater. You are a chosen one, and that means that the universe trusts in your ability to overcome, grow, and enlighten others around you. If you're looking for a deeper connection with your purpose, I recommend the Chosen Devotional, a 40-day journey that can transform your life. It will guide you through daily reflections, strengthening your faith, and helping you find clarity in the midst of uncertainty. It's an invitation to look inwards and discover the divine strength within you. Let us know in the comments, which of these signs resonated with you the most? Share your experience. Your story could be the inspiration someone needs to move forward. I'm George, your friend and spiritual leader, and I'm here to remind you that you're never alone. The universe is by your side, and together we will continue on this journey of light, purpose, and hope. May you receive abundant blessings and live fully what the universe has given you.